And we are on filmsgonewild.com. My name is John Wildman, and we are going to talk about the film Trans Pecos. We've got the director, Nicol Ragland, here. The film is screening at EARTHxFILM, the Environmental Film Festival out of Dallas. Nicol, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be with you.
Okay, let's start this off by having you introduce our audience to the film. They likely have not had a chance to see it as yet. So tell us about Trans Pecos.
Sure. So Trans Pecos is the name of a tri-county region in the Big Bend area of far west Texas. It's also a name of a high-pressure natural gas pipeline that was running from the Permian Basin, 148 miles through the Big Bend, crossing the Rio Grande and into Mexico. The intention was really to get that into essentially a regulatory light environment like Mexico, with very strong evidence that the gas is going to be liquefied and sold to the Asian market. And in so doing, they essentially took 41 landowners' land through the process of eminent domain, which I was really new to in coming into this story, and just how disturbing it is, specifically in the state of Texas, where essentially a private company can go to the Texas Railroad Commission, check a box that says common carrier, and then essentially take land. So it's a portrait of the region, what happens to the community when this level of infrastructure comes through, the difficulty in organizing and trying to stand up against such pipelines, and really just a mapping of eminent domain for private gain, and really one of the last frontiers in this country, and certainly what's best described as the crown jewel of Texas.
Yes. I live here in Dallas, Texas, and have for more than a couple of years now, and it is you pretty quickly get used to the idea that when it comes to the state and local governments, that they are very happy to give over your rights to companies, and not to worry so much about your health, not to worry so much about the possibility that that there could be explosions and or chemical spills or stuff next to you, because business, it's all about business. But we'll get into that. Here's what I wanted to, what's interesting watching the film is that it starts off almost like a tone poem in many ways. It's beautiful. It's peaceful. It's I had these thoughts as the film began of like the CBS Sunday morning little moments of Zen thing that they would used to do, and because it was so wonderful, and I was like going, okay, when's the hammer coming down? And the hammer comes down pretty quickly. But I would love for you to talk about the filmmaking approach, because there's beauty to be had, and then there's a hardcore reality of what's going on there. And I think you do a wonderful job of juxtaposing them and capturing them. So I would love for you to talk about your filmmaking process on this particular film.
Sure. Well, I appreciate your perception and that experience. It means a lot, because that was really very intentional. I'm a lover of poetry. I read a lot of poetry. I memorize poetry in order to get to that serene place, and it's a place that really asks that of you. I think we all experience that when we find land that has us be still and recognize large open spaces that we're losing. And I've been in the world of telling stories for the environment and activism, and oftentimes, especially in places like the state of Texas, we've become so polarized, and so much of this conversation is so adversarial, and the characters that we chose really just have a poetic cadence about them, and they're not your typical activists. Activist is such a loaded word these days, and they really carry themselves with such a reverence for place that it was really important to me to translate through with a really poetic and subversive approach of gently kind of reaching, primarily conservatives and white landowners. Taking land for power is nothing new in this country, and we're all well aware of the amount of treaties that have been broken. And Energy Transfer Partner, who's the same company that basically started this pipeline, is the same company in North Dakota. So as all of this was happening, North Dakota and DAPL was erupting, and that was extraordinary, as we're all well aware of all of that. And so I wanted to create a really sense of place, as well as a type of conversation that hopefully touches people in a place of beauty and poetry, and to say to themselves, to quote one of our cowboys on the ground, this is not an issue of right versus left, it's right versus wrong. And so many of these landowners, they're not, again, typical activists, but the way that they speak about it is very simply like, it's just essentially wrong.
It's, I'm glad that you raised the idea of your subjects of your film, to speak on the film, because you're absolutely right that they're not firebrands, to a person. They are not. They're very direct in what they have to say. And it's funny, like I'm thinking of one moment in particular where you have, a situation where there are some, let's call them proper authorities, who are questioning your right to be there with your cameras, filming. And even in that situation, the questions that, your guide is asking, that person, it's still very calm. And it's like, I'm not going to give you this information that you're probing to get, but I'm also, I'm also being very even toned and being very even tempered. I would love for you to, talk about, because as a documentarian, who you choose to put on camera, and of course, they may not make it through the editing process, but who you go to is sometimes such a crapshoot. In terms of them delivering the information that you're needing to create your story, the writing of the film, but also whether or not they're going to be compelling for us as viewers to listen and not tune them out. So talk about that from your perspective of finding the people that you did, and and having those moments where you're going, oh yeah, this person is great because they're delivering for me.
Yeah, I was commissioned initially by a CEO of a gas company here in Oklahoma to go down there. I'd never been to the Big Bend, and he wanted to tell the story of showing both sides of this issue in terms of the fossil fuel industry addressing the environment. And I was all for that idea. I had actually never been in direct conversation with someone sitting in power, essentially deciding our energy system, which was a really fascinating conversation, which deserves a film in and of itself. I wish I had a camera when that was happening. And I think a lot about reaching those people. I certainly hope that we were successful to reach one or two CEOs or shareholders, because these are folks that in my mind are 1 degree away from those positions in power. And, again, white cowboys and cowgirls, and I mean, certainly citizens, and like Coyne speaks to in the film, I mean, this is housewives, this is artists, this is folks at the border addressing this. But the folks that we chose, to me, really kind of speak to those folks in power. And, in this issue, as we're all well aware, Texans love property rights, Texans love guns, Texans have a lot of pride in oil and gas, understandably. And by virtue of what we've experienced and listened to, what's happening with the border wall, as well as this idea of crossing property rights, is really kind of to use the metaphor of a crosshair, but a crosshair of issues that really ventures into both sides. I think it's speaking to what our friend Mike Davidson spoke to in the film. It's like these little things that keep chipping away where we start losing our civil liberties really has to be amplified, and from this particular contingent, right? These are folks with strong property rights and pride in the land that they have, and equal pride to oil and gas. And so that particular, voice and cadence of saying, this is a fundamental infringement on our basic civil liberties that we are losing, absolutely losing. And asking the question, why is this industry behaving in such a way? Why on earth, can a private company, essentially take your land? There's nothing that you can do about it. Nothing. Right. There's no state agency. There's no ability for folks to go to a place or a meeting in Austin to say, how do we handle this? There's absolutely nothing you can do. So, yeah, well, I think it was just, again, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and then, and which also kind of brings me to the final question I had for you, which is something that, when I watch a film like this, because I'm very politically minded myself, and I'm one of those irritating people on Facebook that gets into debates all the time, and what have you. And I will watch a film like yours, and there's one interview in particular that struck me, and where I watch this and I think about you, Nicol, as you're shooting this and going, you are a better person than I, because as I listen to this person talk, I'm going, I want to correct them, and I want to point out, and in this case, it's the idea of, someone saying, well, this is no big deal. And, and it just happens, and they should just live and let live and whatever. And you go, well, maybe you'd feel different if that pipeline was literally going through your living room. Maybe then it might make a difference to you, but because it doesn't, then it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? They just need to get over it. And so then I'm watching that interview happen, and I'm imagining you behind the camera, if it's me, like going, oh Jesus, I'm going to tear this person apart on camera, and but you don't. To your great credit as a filmmaker, you let them talk, because then it presents, a position and an argument that serves the debate that you are, going to film. But I would love for you to talk personally about what's going through your head. Does it bother you as much as it bothers me, or or not?
Yeah, my inside voice is very different than my outside voice and directing me with the camera. Because so yes, and it's so important to listen to the other side. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing about making documentaries. We all come into a story with our unconscious bias. I clearly have an opinion, and you walk away with the film, about our opinion about the wrongdoing. But I think it's so important to recognize voices on the ground, and a woman. Are you referring to the woman or the cowboy with the woman? So, she's lived there all her life. She has a small business there. It's fascinating to truly listen to the other side and try to, hold both sides. How is it both and, right? And to do your very best. I think about, how do I reach that woman? How do I, and it's fascinating and challenging, but again, how do I, I don't want to be told what to think. I don't want to be told or manipulated or, shout at or whatever. It's like, it's always a question. How do we kind of, basically lay out the facts and with clear voices? And so it's challenging for sure. But I mean, that's the attempt of being a diplomatic director and trying to listen as best I can to all sides, for sure. Well, yeah.
Again, my hat's off to you. It's a wonderful film. Again, the film is Trans Pecos. We've been talking to the director, Nicol Ragland. Nicol, thank you for being on the show.
No, sure. Thank you too. Appreciate your questions. Really thoughtful.